Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm going to wait just a little bit longer, wait for people to jump on since it just now started 11 o'clock. Thank you all for joining us today. If you want, in the chat, let us know where you're logging in from, and if you're with a distillery or what you got going on. So I always like to see where everybody's joining in from. But thank you for joining us. Michael coming in from Oxford, Ohio, Louisville, Palm Springs, California. Good old Baton Rouge, there's Scott. Cole, I just drove through Baton Rouge, but it was on a Sunday morning. I didn't feel I should give you a call to me at the distillery that early, so I hated that I missed you. I was coming back from New Orleans. 39. Very good. All right, I'll go ahead and get this started. Again, thank you all for joining. People kind of sign in as we go. A couple housekeeping things real quick. If you need to change the view and you want to see just the presentation or you need it bigger, the little view button up in the upper right-hand corner is a great way to do that. I'd like to point that out because sometimes people have trouble seeing the presentation. So you can click on that view button up there and see what's going on. Question and answers. So Scott's presentation is going to be about 15 minutes. And then he's got some questions that people submitted early that he'll go through. And then we open it up for questions from you all. Feel free to drop those in the little Q&A down at the bottom. Myself and Shannon will be in the backstage to help kind of moderate those. And at the end of his presentation, I'll jump back on and go through and answer your guys' questions. So he's got a quick presentation. Then we've got plenty of time for you guys to ask Scott everything that you want to know from him. So, with that, we will get started. I don't know what kind of introduction Scott needs in this industry. He's a 5th generation distiller. He's got 25 years of experience. He's owned distilleries. He's helped launch multiple brands. He's the executive director of Thoroughbred, and I want to thank them. Thoroughbred is a title sponsor this year. So Scott, thank you guys for your support. They've been a longtime sponsor in different levels and a longtime supporter of ADI. So we're happy to have him here to share his knowledge and experience and kind of help focus on how craft distilleries can use the current climate to redefine success and make things work for them. So with that, I'm going to jump off. I'm going to hand it over to Scott. Scott, again, thank you so much, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Brandon. Sincere pleasure and kind. Very grateful for the opportunity to help, and thank you for who you are and everything you've done to support us and this organization and the members in it. Good morning, everybody. Happy holidays. Great to see you here with us. It says a lot that you are here. My entire purpose of this presentation is truly to be helpful. As Brandon mentioned, it's about 15-20 minutes. I'm just going to go through some highlights and some big picture thoughts. But the goal is to answer questions. I know it can be a little daunting to ask a question in front of a large group. I promise you're not alone. And the more the questions you ask, the better this is for everybody. Of course, if there's something confidential or a little bit more specific, you'll see our contact information at the end. Please feel free to reach out. Happy to sidebar and address anything in specific. Okay, so if you're here, you're probably have some thoughts about the market, the business, the world, perhaps, but specifically your business. And I want to give you some context on how to view that. And this is an excellent, excellent time to be thinking about that, given that it's the end of year. Some people call it a postmortem. Some people can do it a business review, an annual review. But we can really take these next few weeks and set off 26 in the right direction. And so this is meant to give you a bit of a framework on how to do that. Okay. So here we go. All right. Okay. So the landscape has changed in many ways over the years, probably from when you started. Some of you may be a few years old. Some of you may be a couple decades old. This is different than what we're seeing through the .com bubble, where JohnnyWishbone.com got $1 million and sold something online, even though they had no idea what they did. It's far different than the 2008, 2009 housing crisis. It's also different than COVID. The challenges here are systemic. There's lots of different challenges, and many of these are outside of our control. But as any good therapist will tell you, mine included, you need to focus on what you can control. And I promise there is lots of things to be positive about. So with that, to quote, just like Apostle Paul, I bring you good news. As much as you have maybe reading or may you be seeing in your financial reports or talking to colleagues or coworkers or distributors, it's not that bad. And there's a few things that are happening on here, right? And it's really critical in many things, especially in today's time with the technology we have with social media and news and communication, to read behind the headlines. It's vital to remember the industry news that you're reading, no disrespect to Mr. Mark Brown, doesn't really capture our segment, right? The emerging brands, the craft segment, right? They talk about the bigger brands, the things that have more influence in terms of jobs or financials, right? Because that's bigger news. At the same time, the industry data doesn't capture our segment. Lots of people will point to consumption or share of throat or gully or gums is one I read yesterday. And also like Nielsen data and that kind of stuff, or control state reports. We are such a small fraction of that. Many of our brands, and you in particular and clients, we don't really show up on Nielsen. So not being represented in a lot of this data that's captured isn't necessarily fair or wise to how to view our particular segment. Remember, negative garners more than positive. I can't tell you the number of clients where we'll say, hey, things are terrible, everything is down, but I'm up, or we're doing well, or this brand is doing well. And I promise you, there are many brands that are doing well. Are they having double, triple growth? No. But are they positive? Yeah. Are they entering new markets? Yeah. Are they getting on menus? Yeah. Are they garnering profit? Yeah. But no one wants to talk about that, right? It's much more interesting to talk about a bankruptcy or someone who, siphoned dollars or something that closed and all the other fun stuff, right? So, but we don't talk about a lot of the positives, right? And with that, remember, while we're all in the same game of the alcohol spirits world or three-tier system, the conglomerates are really at what's at stake here, right? In short, and this is pretty much company-wide, right? There's some outliers to honor that, but they're over-leveraged and overexposed, right? We can all look to the bourbon crisis, right? The amount of excess barrels. And those of us who've been around long enough, there's the 80s corollary, that same thing happened. But what a lot of these companies do is they rode the good times of the 2020, right? Projected that forward, had SKUs that often didn't have much flexibility or had large holes in their business. But the companies that are really garnering all this attention are the bourbon producers. And they went fucking nuts in terms of their expansion. And that's a technical term, by the way, right? Some of them double, triple their capacity. And a lot of them without great insight or overbelief that China was going to, or India was going to be the next saving grace, or people were going to continue to grow things. Look, I've been around long enough that anything that came in a martini glass was a martini, right? Chocolate martinis, apple teenies, you're welcome, right? Like that craze is gone. And then there is the agave craze, and then, anything else. And then it became bourbon, right? And now it's, RTDs, et cetera. Our business is cyclical, but when these particular companies went double and triple down on their production capacity on not even stills, but distilleries that they didn't need, that is crazy capital. And the reason they often did it is the opportunity cost was far too great, right? Missing a sale opportunity for them versus laying down another barrel. Nobody wants to be that finance guy or commercial director that misses an opportunity. Also, you had a bit of the blind leading the blind. So I've talked about this quite a bit because I want you to understand that the news that you're hearing and often experiencing feeling doesn't overly apply to us. And the big segment that is at the greatest risk and garnering a lot of attention is at the bourbon and whiskey level of production. And by the way, that does apply a bit to the Irish and Scotch producers as well. So, and here's the other scoop. Distributors didn't focus on your brand in new time. The RNDC consolidation, leaving the number one market, California, Southern having a much more robust system, Johnson Brothers acquiring some brands, some distributors leaving, they're paying more attention to what they keep in stock, all that kind of fun stuff. Listen, we didn't have a lot of support from distributors in the first place. And all the good brands all have their own sales teams and rely on their own sales team. So the noise at the second tier, as long as they're still paying their bills, which some aren't, by the way, which is important to be mindful of. And by the way, if they're not paying you, things often get better, right? So if you're 90 days in arrears, a little side note with your distributor, it's time to send a very firm letter. I know there's lots of distributors who are really obsessed with me that are taking advantage of this tier by delaying payments or not paying at all. So again, if you're above 90 days in arrears, be aggressive. Okay, but the point is, we just need trucks, right? And as long as we've always kept that understanding and we're still doing the work, effort, and energy to move these brands, what's happening in the second tier really doesn't affect us, right? Okay, so it's important to reset. In the beginning, when you had this idea for the business, right, they were full of passion, right? There was an opportunity you saw, there was a drive to actually make something, there was an enjoyment of the hospitality element of this business, there was a fellowship of this industry, and it was exciting, right? And depending on when you launched, you had some pretty good tailwinds behind you, right? Pushing you forward, new opportunity. The consumer was experimenting with everything. People were spending, $50 for a 375 of 3-month-old product from upstate New York, right? Great times. And then the consumer eventually got a little wiser. Competition got a little too wide. Distributors started to pull. But the point I want to take you back in this time is it's very easy to forget your intended purpose as to why you entered this business in the first place. And it's also easy in times like this to have knee-jerk reactions and over-respond, over-correct, or over-adjust based on what it is. And the critical thing I want to remind you of is that this is a business that you get to do, you don't have to do. And I think that's a critical element that often gets missed from times of trouble. So when you think back about that time, right, you can start to ask yourself the next series of questions, right? And that is, where are we going, right? Redefining success. And it's quite possible that what you defined as success when you first started may look different now, right? And one of the ways is that when you define it personally and professionally, as you've gotten a little older or a little wiser, or both, right? your season of life may have influenced your operation and how you think about the business. Were you married? Did you have children? Do you have greater cash requirements or capital requirements? Is your risk tolerance adjusted first you began? Are you spending too much time away from home, traveling, right, et cetera, et cetera? Is it pulling a strain on your relationship? These are very genuine questions, right? Because again, this is a get to business, not have to business. Then you also want to define it professionally. Well, what I'm earning or how hard I'm working, this isn't really a career for me. Or I need to make adjustments in order to do that. Or, hey, I'm not making as much, or I can make more if I'm willing to do these things. But here are the different levers I need to pull, right? So looking at this dynamic from a personal and professional perspective. And then from there, defining goals, right? 1, 3, and 10-year visions, right? Obviously, I did not come up with this, but the 10-year vision, right? Some people refer this as a BHAG or the big goals of where you want a big, hairy, audacious goal, whatever it may be. That's where you want to go, right? That's the North Star. The 3-year is a way to check in, right? Am I doing things the right way in order to get to that 10-year vision? And the 1-year is what you're going to start doing now, right? This is the perfect time, as I mentioned, to be thinking about this. 2026, you've got 3 weeks to start planning through and hopefully some quiet time to really start to plan through this. If you listen to nothing else from me or this presentation, take the time to do these first 2 steps, right? Define personally and professionally what your 1, 3, and 10-year vision is, right? 10 years, the big picture, 3 is the checkpoint, and 1 is what we're going to start doing next year. Right? And when you look at this, right, everyone has a little slightly different definition on how we assess these things. But where are you today, right? And this takes incredible humility, right, to really answer that, right? And also, you have to take away a lot of the bias, right? Not reading the news, looking at things from a calm and spiritual perspective, right? And being able to define what's holding us back. Well, the economy, or that stupid distributor, or that key account that swapped up their menu. No, that's not it. By the way, these are things that you're always going to face. And by the way, I've worked with very large suppliers as well. They have the same issues, a little less degree, but they have the same issue, right? So, what's really holding you back? Then from there, what are your critical strengths? And newsflash, and this was very hard for me to deal with, is I'm not great at everything, right? What are your real strengths? What are the things that you're really good at? Hey, I love making things and I can distill the heck out of any type of substrate or grain, but I'm not the best at sales and marketing. Honor that. Acknowledge that. Inverse can also be true, right? How am I looking at these things and what is it that my true skill sets are? Then looking at it from a business perspective, right? What is you as a business really great at? Well, you know what? We're an amazing sales and marketing company. We're not the best at making things. That's fine. Plenty of companies like that. But how do you pivot? Or do you bring in resources or skill sets that offset that, right? Most of us are wonderful makers. We don't like the things that happen, as my grandfather said, outside the still or outside our 4 walls, the commercial side of the business. I hate dealing with distributors. Everything be wonderful if I didn't have these damn customers, right? So looking at it and being able to really assess those strengths. Again, from a personal and professional perspective, I promise you a lot of the challenges are internal, right? Just to kind of get ahead of this. And what you are not acknowledging as your strengths and your weaknesses, what are you holding back? I promise you your team is, and they know. Right? And then lastly, are we maximizing opportunities? This is critical. There are so many things in front of us. Oftentimes, we just don't dedicate enough time and resources behind it, right? And then with that is prioritizing. Another thing I had to deal with is that I can't do everything, right? I can pick 2 or 3 things that I can really focus on. But when I put that effort and energy behind that, good things come. So when we're looking at this, there are things that you just can't control. right? And we define those as external factors, right? Everyone has different definitions of this as well. In our industry, I can't control US spirit trends. Even though I have almost 2,000 people following me, really working on that goal for this year, if anyone would like to add to that. Kidding aside, I have zero influence on what people start to drink. I can educate and I can show and I can build brands, but I'm not going to move trends, right? Like we are unless Beyonce's here. Hey, Beyonce. You're not going to influence trends either. Also not going to influence the craft spirit trends. You're not going to get people to start, paying more for all these different products, right? We have to educate, we have to show, we have to be a part of that community. And the distribution landscape. Until we do well over 1 million cases and then some, at the end of the day, we have very little leverage over the distributor world. And I will tell you, as I mentioned, working with even very large global suppliers, they don't have as much influence as they used to either, right? The distributors got very smart through acquisition and changed the dynamic of leverage, which is what this whole game is always about. And right now, the distributor landscape is in their favor, right? When I started, and even before me, in Illinois, we had dozens and dozens of distributors, dozens. Getting distribution was no problem. Realistically, you have two options depending on the size of your brand. Two. And they represent probably over 85% of the market share. Not a lot of options. That's intentional, by the way. You also can't change state laws, right? It takes a long time. You can put effort and energy, and many of us, and ADI in particular, put incredible resources to change the laws, but the game's the game right now, right? The DTC movement, I am extremely excited about, but I will tell you, our largest client does maybe 10% of their overall business online. It's not the game changer. Should you focus on it, put a little energy and resources behind it? Yeah, 100%. But we don't have the time to try and dedicate all these resources for DTC. Okay? These are things we can talk about, we can commiserate over, drink over, but we're not going to change. But these are things you can, right? And so this comes from my restaurant hospitality upbringing with my family, the front stage and backstage, right? Front of the house, back of house. Here's what I can't control: my product mix. I can decide what I make. I can control my branding. I can control how I treat people and the hospitality that happens within my four walls. And I can certainly control my messaging and how I talk to the marketplace. And when I look at this, and you'll see as we eventually start to do an audit, the product mix is one thing that's tripping up many of us. We simply make too much. And I'll get into that. But these are all things I can control, right? And this is, by the way, front stage. These are things that the consumer sees, right? Or the trade sees. And then in backstage, other things I can control. I can develop my systems and procedures. I can control how we process things. I can control my finances. How well we're doing at that is another conversation, but I can certainly control that. My route to market, what markets I pursue, what people and energies I put behind that. And then the number one big secret is culture. You, as most of you are leaders or founders of your organizations, directly control culture. And culture is key. Many of the problems that we face often stem from culture, right? So if you've seen this presentation or this part of it before, you've seen this, right? But this is critical. What percentage of executives identify internal factors as the cause of the limitations of their success? Said simply, for those who have troubles, for those who are unable to scale, for those who fail, how much is external versus internal? Yikes. But awesome, because I can control that. Let's just say it's half true, right? It's 40%. Can you control 40%? Okay, Ken, you're an entrepreneur. You've been through one of the toughest times and in one of the toughest industries. You can change this. And the point is, you can give 100%. I know that I am surrounded by some of the hardest working people I know. Absolutely. But you can still limit success. And the secret is if you know what matters and you act on what matters with the right intentionality, right focus, you can dramatically raise the ceiling of success. But that's it in per second. You, despite all these headlines, have the opportunity to be in control of your success. And this isn't meant to be an overly uplifting or, I have no book to sell. But the cool thing is I wanted to reset your mindset. I wanted to reset your thinking as to all the challenges that are going on there. So, Scott, that's great. The hell do I do with all that? Some practical steps. Critical thing is to approach this with vulnerability, to really take an inside look. I would encourage you to step outside physically and emotionally and mentally from the business. Leave. Go away for 2 days. Book yourself a hotel room, even if it's down the street. Just go for a long drive. Get out of the building. Step away from the business. If you go out to eat, don't go to a bar or someplace that serves alcohol. Because I know everyone on this phone call, we get into the restaurant, we walk past the bar before we go to our table. Just step away from them. You want to be able to look at things clearly. Turn off your phone, turn off social media, all the other fun things, and really set the pace to be present. And then approach this with incredible vulnerability. Be your own critic, but also your own advocate in that perspective. And then define what success looks like. Write it out. Blank sheet of paper. You can write personally and professionally and just see what pours out. And then eventually you'll want to put some timelines to it, right? Remember the 1, 3, and 10-year perspective. After you define that, look at what kind of business you built. A culture audit. The hell is that? It's looking at the dynamic. You might not be able to define this, but you can feel it. You understand the stress. You understand the people who are happy or frustrated. You know when you're happy or frustrated. You know when things just work even when they're not supposed to, and you know things that don't work even when they are easy to do. That's culture. What is the dynamic within your organization, the human element, right? And again, this is the most important thing. I've given a presentation on this specific subject, which I'm happy to share, but this is critical. It's also why we hired a psychologist on our staff to help people, because the human element is what is upsetting many of these businesses. Then do a sales audit. Scott, I look at reports on a monthly basis. No. Do a real one. Walk through velocity. What SKUs are really working? What I say to people is if you had, many of you have really wide portfolios, 10 SKUs, 20 SKUs, 50 SKUs. Say if I had 2 bullets and a gun of my hypothetical portfolio and both had to hit, meaning my chance of sales or velocity to pull through are really high, which is not the reality. What am I really going to focus on? Not the thing I love the most, not the thing I made for my friend or my spouse, but what really sells. And start to look to cull or have very curated focus on a lot of those things. And I know these are all your babies. You get it. I'm a brand owner too in the past. But not everything is going to work and carry forward. And a lot of the dead weight is actually holding you back. Because even when you sell one SKU really well, they look at the laggards more than the success, right? Oh, that one SKU, that's on fire. Man, if they could sell the hell out of that. Yeah, but then they have a couple of dogs. What do they talk about? What do they talk about in your business reviews? What does the bar manager say when you come to visit them? How am I going to help me turn through this? Yeah, but I need 10 cases a week on this other product. Yeah, I know, but how are you going to help me sell this one that's not moving? On the brand audit, This is super personal, right? How does it look? How does it say? What is it saying? I love this packaging. My nephew made it, or I designed it, or people know it. People would hate us if we changed it. All brands could use some polishing and should get some modifications about every 10 years. Maybe it's time to visit. Maybe your brand isn't saying as much. Look, my grandfather taught me something very important. Rarely is the best tasting the best selling. And that was his Italian way of saying, like, look, son, this is a marketing based industry. And there are some beautiful products in poor packaging that just don't get the right attention they deserve. And the inverse is 100% true. There are some beautiful packaging that have absolute nonsense inside in terms of product. And then set your compass. What are your mission, vision, and values, right? How am I, now that I know where I'm going and what success looks like, I've reviewed what my culture is, right? How do I set the compass? And those are mission, visions, and values, right? A lot of you already have these, but it's a good idea to find them. So, what are the critical aspects? How do you actually do these audits, right? Oh, sorry, I got ahead of myself. Create a questionnaire. First place to start. Detailed questions of all the things you want to know or afraid to ask. Start to put them out, right? Align with your strategic team, internal and external, right? So your sales team, marketing team, your fellow department heads. Also key stakeholders, right? Maybe it's your brand manager at your distributor house. Maybe it's your sales rep at your glass vendor. Lots of variable things, and you start to get these questions answered. Also ask customers, right? You got to be smart about this, but many of you have tasting rooms. That is the best test marketing and way to get data on the planet. It's in the right environment, in a place that they can see it and actively judge in real time, right? And then this one takes incredible vulnerability, especially if you didn't end on the best of terms. But the ones that you didn't end on the best of terms are actually the ones that provide the best data. Former employees, former customers, right? What happened? What did you experience here? I know many of us don't do exit interviews, right? Although we should, right? But what happened? What did you really like working most about it? What was the best part about selling our brand? What was the most frustrating part about selling our brand, right? Getting into the real aspect, right? Getting to the heart of the matter, right? To quote my friends at Counting Crow, right? How do you get to the heart of the matter of what's really getting? And you need to ask people. And again, going back to my previous point, it takes a vulnerability to get there. So once you have this, how do you start acting on it? Well, first thing is a strategic plan. Taking that 1, 3, and 10-year vision that you define success with and identify and address core opportunities and challenges, right? Taking all the stuff we just talked about from the assessment, the audits, detail, the feedback, and what you're personally looking to go, and then putting those into an action-oriented plan, right? And strategy is one thing, tactics are another, right? Oh, we're going to grow sales by 10%. Awesome. That would do wonderful things for our cash flow. You made our CFO very happy. But how? How are you actually going to do that? And what markets? And where are you going to focus? And what are the skills needed? And do I have the right salespeople to get it? Am I with the right distributor? What SKUs are going to help really get us there? Once I've defined that plan, it's an awesome plan. I love the tactics. Doesn't mean anything unless it aligns with financials, right? And I know almost all of us by now have some form of a financial model. It can't be fast for treats, and it needs to be really detailed. You have to know your COGS. It's upsetting when someone cannot tell me what their real COGS are. We'll help you, of course, but you should know that. This is the lifeblood, right? How profitable do you think you really are? Are you sure? Right? The classic phrase, you're not making enough money. That's all right. We'll make it up in volume. No, I need a numerical business plan. And I need to account for all these other elements. I also need to know if I can afford my strategic plan. And does my plan actually make profit? Sounds good. Everyone's excited about it. Everyone participated in it. But I don't know if it makes any money. Cultural assessment. This is something that you often want to work with an outside group to do, right? Some form of coaches are great. I can coach you on business. Can't coach you on your personal life, right? I don't have the degrees and background to do that. So working with some type of therapist or psychologist that can really provide real value, not just personality assessments, which I love, by the way, and everybody uses them, adore them. But that's only a fraction of it. Getting to the cultural element takes people who understand people. And often that's a skill set that needs to be required with somebody who has that background. Employee assessment and goal setting. What gets rewarded gets repeated. They're not the most fun to do. They're often laborious. They're often repetitive. But really great businesses have constant assessments, 6 months to a year at a maximum, every 6 months to a year. Because people who work for you, especially in this industry, they're passionate. They want to win, but often they don't know what success looks like, or they may not even have the resources to be successful for it. Those employee assessments is another way to get into the action items. And then lastly, what are you doing for yourself, right? What type of leadership and individual development are doing? Your distiller may have really great management experience and potential, but didn't go to business school. There's a science background. Okay, well, now you're asking them to be a business manager. Do they have those skill sets? Hey, you've done a wonderful job getting to where you're at. But is there anybody else that you can confer with or bounce ideas off of or help you grow or provide more insight and wisdom? You need to be able to grow in as much as you want your staff to grow, right? That's also how you hand off responsibility and build up your team. And lastly, this is an open and ongoing dialogue, right? Really including everybody. Working on one project, and a guy who worked part-time in the bottling line turned out ran logistics for a major retailer for the entire country. He just did it for insurance and like to get off away from his boredom of being retired. But they had a gold mine sitting in their business that had all these ideas about logistics, and nobody knew. Nobody asked them, right? So including lots of people in this process, many of us have lots of different skill sets that we can bring to the table. At the very least, we have insight because we've been working on. So, little parting wisdom. People ask a lot, especially people who are starting, should I be in this industry anymore? And this is going to come off really harsh. But this is actually a really good thing that we're going through this changes, because those of us who are willing to do what it takes, make changes, you're going to be very successful over the next couple of years. It's going to be painful. I do not see this ending in 2026. I still think there's going to be lots of hardships, but those that invest and those that come forward are going to leapfrog against many of the businesses that are just simply giving up. And if you're at that phase, I don't wish ill will on you by any stretch. My first business did not work out. My second one did. I have brave, not sympathy, but empathy for those who have failed. It's also where I learned the most, by the way, as you will too, or are learning. But all these changes and the lack of focus from the conglomerates is a good thing for us to be able to push forward. Eventually, the right brands and the right attention and the right focus will be there. And if you're here, it already tells me a lot that you're willing to learn and do that. A critical thing to remember is that you're too close to your business. I'm too close to Thoroughbred, right? Same thing with, you don't represent your own case in court. You don't perform your own surgery on a loved one. You are too close to do all this assessment yourself. Work with somebody. Ask your staff, work with a consultant, work with a group, work with a colleague, but somebody else outside of the direct business, someone who can provide you a bit of a neutral view, right? So we're also very passionate about it. One of the things that drives us so much is we are so passionate. That passion can also be And lastly, be patient. As I mentioned, this isn't going to change anytime soon, but at the same time, you have to be decisive. If an employee is not working out, the SKU is not working out, distributor's not working out after repeated effort and energies, do not keep hoping that things are going to change. The good times of the past, constant upward swings, have covered up a lot of challenges and problems that got overlooked. Well, that's not the best sales rep, but at least our market's growing by 5%. That's not true anymore, often. So now we have to make those decisions. And loyalty is one of the most important characteristics to me, but you can also be loyal to a fault. And a lot of times we're holding on to staff or ideas, products that we should let go. And now's the time to do that. Okay. So, submitted questions, I'll answer these and then we'll answer it up to the chat. We'll go through what anybody has. I'll be able to see the chat box here in a minute. One question on here that I did not add, which is how do we create the next beatbox? In all fairness, we were engaged to help analyze that assessment. It's a shit brand with shit liquid and overly questionable ethics on how they went to market. Having said all that, they did a lot of what I just talked about, and they were ruthless at focus and metrics, and they put extensive energy and effort at growing and getting after the business. Some of their metrics and data points of how they track sales and marketing spends, some of the best I've ever seen. Having said that, it also took them a decade or more to start to turn the corner. So nothing's quick. Okay, some serious questions. How do we know when to keep going or stop? If you're asking this question, it's probably a good indication that you should be really thinking about the latter. This is a passion-driven business. If you are sacrificing too much at home or financials, your risk tolerance is out of balance, and every month is another challenge, it should be a really good idea to start thinking about selling, partnering, offloading, or culling back. At the same time, if you still have the risk tolerance, the bandwidth, the emotional capital, keep going. I really believe that this is going to be a very good thing for the brands that are checking all the right boxes and are willing to do what it takes. And you're going to come out much better on the coming side over the coming years. Next question. What have you seen as the most impactful activities clients who have grown in recent years? We have multiple projects that are up. And no one wants to hear that, but it's true. And a lot of them is they're doing the core things. They're not growing and adding multiple states, by the way. Many of them have polished packaging, have built out a sales team, and have put in forth a robust financial plan, right? So we work with them on fractional CFO services. We help analyze and manage their sales teams, but they're also really focusing. And we have idea of core 3 or core 2, core 4 on a stretch. Those are the 2 or 3 or 4 products that they're focusing on. We're going deep versus wide, so depth versus breadth. You may not be impressed by the number of states that light up on their map on their website, but in the 3 to 5 states that are in, they're turning and they're selling, right? California is like 6 states in one. Not even Diageo has mastered California. Texas is another one, right? Any major market. And then even smaller markets, regional markets, maybe, which volume-wise would be a B and C, but would be A in our hearts. Missouri, Ohio, parts of South Carolina as an example. Those are markets where you can really do a lot of volume if you focus, because there's also not a whole lot of competition. Do I need to keep releasing new products, variants, or enter new states, markets, or grow my business? No. Yeah, to my previous point, that's actually could be to your detriment. I love LTOs when they're planned and curated and add real value, right? Things that, people build up a bit of rapport for. One of the things when I was working on the Stranahan's project, like we love the idea of Snowflake, and the team has grown that to where they now camp out 3 days in advance for that annual release. That's wonderful. Many other companies do similar things, right? High West and their midsummer midnight dream or midwinter dream or whatnot. But constantly coming up with new products, not only are you exhausting resources internally, because remember, every SKU costs glass and storage and bulk and tank space and all that kind of fun stuff. It also adds more weight to the bag of your sales team because they feel they have to sell all these different products. Your distributors right now definitely aren't looking for things unless it's absolutely turning. And a lot of us who have branded houses, the bar may love you, but they don't want to be looked at as a branded bar from your account, right? So again, and I know the argument that many of the sales team will say, and especially internal sales teams, were like, we have nothing new, we have nothing special. I know that probably infuriates you because it should, right? Jack Daniels is not new, but they still go out and sell it and grow it. Now they've added some line extensions recently, which is an over conversation, but that's not new. And what you make is special. Your gin is special. Your bourbon is special. Now, if you're just buying neutral vodka and bottling it, yeah, I get the point, but then that's a strategic move. But don't fall victim to the distributor or your sales team or somebody saying we need something new or something unique or something special. Your core products of what you sell are special and unique. Again, depth versus breadth. Next question with limited funds, where's the best to invest in your business? Sales, hands down, feet on the street. As mentioned, and you already know this, distributors are not focusing on your brands at all. If there's no one representing you and your tasting room may be doing well, and I understand you got hell of a nice margins, but that's at the end of the day, if we really strip it back, that's a bar that makes its own product. You need to use the profit from that and put it out into the marketplace. That's how you build a brand. It's also how you build enterprise value. So limited funds, we all have limited funds to some degree. Sales personnel. And how do brands go to a market on a small budget? I don't mean this to be cursed, but the reality is we don't. They don't. You can invest in a salesperson, right? But even that, by the time you budget and bonus and T&E and so forth, that's $150,000 a year, right? Health insurance, all that fun stuff. And when we first started 19 years ago, our average project was 2 to 3 million, in initial funds. Our average project today is 15 to 20. And we've worked on projects that are north of 200 million. You're still competing with all those companies. And if you're worried or not in a position to fund a salesperson or to put marketing budget, you need to raise money. There's no, or invest more. And I don't mean to be coy with that, but I also don't want to give false hope in that you can continue to go to market as we used to. Again, back in the day, 2010, you could get away with selling 6-month-old bourbon in a 375 for $50 and just sell because it was local and you had an overly curious consumer. That behavior and acceptance, the emotional versus rational benefit has completely shifted. It takes resources to move forward. And doing a strategic plan or financial model can be the tools you need to go raise those funds. And believe it or not, investing in businesses are more encouraging to a lot of people right now than investing in the stock market, which is one of our big hurdles as private companies to try and raise money. Okay. So that's the presentation. This is my contact information. You can send me an email, follow up, different note, anything you'd like to have. This presentation will be shared afterwards for anybody who participated, so you don't have to worry about screenshots, etc. And again, if you have a question that isn't comfortable for the chat box here, happy to sidebar with you and make sure we get you in a good spot. Okay. All right.
Scott, thanks so much. As Scott said, at the bottom there is a Q&A tab. if you want to enter a question into there, it kind of helps just keep everything local, and I can tab what we answer. So if you've got a question for Scott on anything, you know, how he decorated his beautiful Christmas tree in the background,
Well,
you know,
in
let him
interest of
know.
full disclosure, I am in a hotel lobby in Atlanta, Georgia, traveling. So I would love to take credit for this, but that is not my handiwork. That is somebody else. But yeah, and there is a bar right there, so that is handy. So I'm man of my word of staying true.
Yeah, and I should have pointed out, I'm up at Iron Root right now in Denison, Texas, for our blending workshop with Nancy Fraley. So the group right now is doing a blending workshop. But you know, it's funny you mentioned you know, bad news is what gets clicks. And
Mm.
you know, my background is marketing public relations. I've never worked at a distillery. I do supplier relations for ADI right now. And I was sitting here thinking, you know, we just saw that, you know, Rogue Brewery and Spirits, you know, overnight locked up everything. But, you know, right behind me here is a brand new 2,000-gallon still. They've got 4 new large fermentation tanks, and, you know, they're squeezing in their very small facilities. So, you know, you have those stories out there of people who are growing, who are doing great things, uh, that are in there. Let's see. Andre, I have a bourbon company that only does special releases. Do I have to have a shelf brand?
Oh, that's a great question. So the specialty releases, depending on where you're based and where you can ship to, if you've built up a solid rapport with a list of clients, kind of taking a page from the wine companies, that's a great business model. I will tell you, if you really want to build enterprise value and truly scale, you will want to start to work with at least some very specific accounts. Also, what builds often notoriety or collectability is when it's at really premium on-premise accounts. So you may want to focus on a state or two, and this, it's counterintuitive, but in this specific example, and I'm making a bunch of assumptions about your brand, if it's $100 plus, being in some ultra markets like New York, maybe even Las Vegas. I was in Las Vegas the other day. There's some crazy retailers there that have some really specialty stuff, even in the casinos. I think it was called Wally's. Just having some exposure there would be really smart. And then in addition, getting into some really key on-premise retailers, right? So the really super high-end, high-end steakhouses, a little bit more flashier places, collectibility places. Again, that builds brand value, which builds enterprise value, which is, if you ever intend to sell the business, is what really matters.
Awesome. Tiffany Gibson asks, would love to know your thoughts on pay for sales folks, structure for base, commissions, and travel.
Yeah, great question. Depends on where you're based, but let me just take a B-level market. Let's take Tennessee in honor of my colleague Miss Shanna. So Tennessee is a B market, not because it's not A in terms of people, but it's just in terms of volume, right? It's a B level volume. So in that market, it's also it's a city, but it's a little bit more affordable. Blah blah blah. Base pay for what we would define as a state manager, so somebody who can work with the distributor. Let's stop using the word manage because we're not managing anything, but work with the distributor. Um, Also call on key accounts, right? As well as be able to speak to bartenders, right? So it's this bit of a hybrid role. Um, in a role like that, you're probably looking at 70,000 base, maybe 80 for good talent with experience, 5 to 10 years of supplier management. I do not like hiring distributor personnel into supplier roles, and unless for leadership roles. They're good for roles that roll up to a leader, but training the distributor mindset to the supplier mindset doesn't work. Inverse is also true. A lot of R&DC's issues, they brought in supplier mindsets into distributor world. So answer your question, 70 to 80 base, maybe another 15 to 20,000 in bonus, and just call it 100,000. Travel and entertainment in a market like that, if you're covering the entire state, might be 2,500 to 3,500 a month in terms of coverage to make the move. And then if you do a car allowance, anywhere from 7 to 850 a month will be the average.
Nice. Lee Wood asked, you mentioned limited SKUs. What is the sense of the optimal number of products to bring to market?
Yeah. Depends on, again, what those products are, right? So, for example, if you had a liqueur line, you might have two or three. If you had a gin line, you might have two. But in terms of selling, I love core three because amongst those three products that I'm really focusing on, let's say one's a gin, one's a bourbon, and one's a liqueur. Maybe they're burnt out on gin, but I still have something else I can sell them, right? And inverse is also true. And then when I do a really good job in one category, I've earned their trust. I can bring in and start to speak in another category. The key, particularly in the on-premise world, is mixability, right? And so you want to have things that can play with a varietal of drinks versus things that are just once in a lifetime or modifiers, right? Like we worked on the largest absinthe in the country, but you use a rinse in a somewhat esoteric cocktail, and very few people are losing anymore. So yeah, you've got that size, but I'm not offering a lot of volume. And distributors also look for things that turn, right? Going back to my beatbox example, right? And sorry to get on my soapbox again, but nobody's proud or would give beatbox as a gift, right? But they love the volume it does. And so looking at things that deliver volume, and usually amongst three SKUs is what you can focus on internally. It's also what the maximum of the distributor can focus on.
James has a long question here. What is one piece of advice you would give about finding success in markets when producing an aged product? Do you see carrying a neutral spirit in your portfolio benefits your business while producing aged products as well? We are in Central Washington and have access to a wide variety of crops and fruits to explore opportunities, as well as being direct to consumer in a tough state to keep the spirit business running.
Okay. You might want to leave that one open for just a second so I can address that there.
James.
James, thanks for the question. So
great answer. Great question.
So I'm a big proponent of a house of brands, and I'll share with you why. House of brands is that each product category, and sometimes even multiple categories, have the same category have different brands. So your vodka brand would be called one thing, your gin brand would be called something, your bourbon brand. At the maximum, my preference is to have, the unaged spirits in one brand and the aged spirits in another. Anyway, one of our favorite strategies is to have weapons, right? And so when I walk in the previous answer, when I go into an account, I want to be able to offer value and to be able to compete. So in your example, having an unaged spirit to go after the well cocktail, or to be in the well, or to have something that you can use as leverage. So, hey, I'm giving you a really great deal on my vodka in order so you'll carry my bourbon, or I'm keeping my bourbon price high so that I can discount on my vodka, which I not as passionate about. It's a loss leader, or, slightly profitable. I love that strategy, but you don't want to have your $10 vodka branded and in the same style as your $70 bourbon, right? So, but I love strategy. I love being able to walk into an account. Same reason I like three brands or three product lines, to be able to go in and offer that. When it comes to vodka, I actually really like vodka. I know you're not supposed to say that, but to me, when you make vodka from scratch, like, you have to be really good at what you do. I also probably got burned a little bit, or caught the bug is a better way to say it, from working at Hangar One, which is beautiful product back in the day. And so the problem is with the potato, and we work on one brand in California, which is sweet potato, which is probably off the record one of my favorite spirits. The consumer just doesn't care, right? All these fun things you can distill from, that's really exciting. I would love to taste them with you. But the consumer doesn't care. And that added cost and added equipment just often doesn't pay out. So when you're trying to find things of value, vodka, unfortunately, just doesn't often communicate that. However, in other substrates here, you can make liqueurs or use some of those unique things for gins. And to me, great brands are all about defining this balance of meaningful and unique, right? Things that stand out, unique, but I can also play with them, right? Absinthe is unique, but there's not much I can do with it. However, you take a brand like Hendrix, right? And it was unique with the cucumber, right? But meaningful because I can still make a gin and tonic or a gin martini. So don't be discouraged just from a base component, but seeing how you can use those unique things. And Washington has a lot of wonderful things going for it in terms of crops and citrus, et cetera. And that Northwest mindset is a really beautiful brand proposition. But lastly, Washington is very competitive, is probably over-indexed in the number of craft distillers. And in our Washington-based projects, we often look to expand quite quickly outside the state because the volume and local competition tends to be overwhelming. Oh, and your last thing, sorry, DTC. Again, our larger project does almost 10% of their volume on DTC. It's not a silver bullet. It's something to have, but just spend the right amount appropriate for it. What it's really good for is that if you have a high traffic or difficult to get to tasting room, both things are true. Opposite ends of the coin, where people love your product but live in other states and can't get to it, it's an awesome way to keep that membership going and for them to be able to continue to buy it, assuming you're not distributed in that state. Okay. All right, I think we got it. Looks like Todd's next.
Yeah, Todd, Stricker asked, how long in years do we wait to make SKU decisions? Clears and aged spirits. Aged spirits obviously take time to age. Keep producing to make sure we can keep up with demand if it works.
Yeah. So aged spirits is when we work on a project from scratch or we work with an existing company. The first thing we do is put together the strategic plan and then the financial model, right? So we'll see you guys have figured out this, seen our playbook. So use it. You want to know those things now because you want to, every year you wait, you get behind the eight ball. So defining your portfolio in the very beginning is critical. It's also how we define the number of brands. If the brands should be called the same, should they look different? What equipment am I buying? What equipment am I investing in? And if you decided, if I read your question a different way, Todd, if your clear spirits are doing well, then you're realizing one thing, that, hey, these products are doing well. I have influence in the marketplace. People are resonating with my brand. People are resonating with my business. I like operating my business. Then it becomes a strategic decision to invest in it. So if that's your question, I would say it usually takes about 2 or 3 years to kind of see momentum to be able to make that decision. So see the performance of the unaged spirits for about 3 years and then make a decision. And the cool thing is what I remind people is that the industry is not going away. So whether you launch something in 2 years or 5 years, it's still going to be an industry.
Ryan Cooney asked, how much runway do you think RTDs are going to have? Is it more of just a trend that folks are afraid of missing the boat on?
I think with most things, there's a underlying amount that will always remain. I think COVID helped bring the RTD culture and mindset to the forefront. Look, these things aren't new. Australia has been in this format for decades. The US tried this, by the way, several decades ago. And then it came forward, and then things like Bartles and James, and you're welcome. Thank you for your support. Zima, other things of that nature came forward. Oh, there's a smile. So I think I would not be getting into just a plain gin and tonic, but if I offered something that had a very meaningful brand, right? Look at Liquid Death, and it's fucking canned water, right? And awful. I love Arnold Palmer, so they make an awful one. But it's a brand, right? And those things are really good. But then when the flavor, you want to be able to offer something that someone can't make at home, right? So I understand the convenience part, but we don't produce at the volume or have as much influence to be able to compete on the volume, right? And what I mean by that, or is this the convenience alternative? When Sapphire Gin came out with Sapphire and Tonic, brilliant, super smart. Brand is super well established. People love Sapphire. It's a gorgeous can. And by the way, we anyway can do some really cool stuff with cans because the foundation of designing on cans is super cool. But you look at spritzes and other things of that nature, things that I'm not going to just make for myself because the vodka soda, the simple things, we don't have enough influence or probably enough resources to go and really compete in that segment. And at the end of the day, a gin and tonic from one brand versus a gin and tonic from your brand, unless your gin is meaningful and unique, is probably the same. And it'd be better to sell your bottled version versus your can version right now. But I think it's here to stay. And I think I would look at it as long as you're offering a true point of differentiation.
Kirby Roaster asks, what's your view on farm distillery business model? Has that had any changes over the past few years?
Oh, Kirby, good to see your voice name, brother. Kirby, I still love you. And I'm still overly bullish on farm distillers. And not just because you are one, but I think that the cornerstone of what this business is about is being able to make things ourselves, having true points of differentiation, which you do. You grow your own corn, having a true sense of place, which you certainly do, having a world-class tasting room, which you clearly do, having gorgeous packaging, if you're welcome, which you clearly do. And now your next phase is to expand outside those walls, outside the state of Missouri, right? So to me, those are underlying fundamental things. Now, what has changed in those times? The cost of buying bulk bourbon versus making yourself, there's probably some temptation there. But when you look at all the points of differentiation, it's truly, and I'm not pandering to you, he knows me better. It's truly the farm distillers and the true makers, and where you can point to the ground, right, and say, this is what I made, literally from seed to flask, or whatever cool catchphrase you want to do. Those are the brands that I think are going to be the long-lasting ones, as long as they start to expand outside their four walls.
Yeah, and on that, I'll add, because again, I've never worked for a distillery, I've never owned one. I've done some bottling, but from the marketing background, as I travel around and I talk with people, and we talk about how, the impact, everyone's down. You get that doom and gloom from the big boys of how down they are, and then you had Scott Galloway on Bill Maher's show the other day, who talked about the anti-drinking movement is one of the most impactful to people because you're not getting out and socializing anymore.
Yes.
You're not getting out and think of all the relationships you have. Did alcohol play a part? I looked back, all the people I stay in touch with, I met at Pinch Penny Pub in Carbondale, Illinois. And those are still friends of mine who I visit with when I travel. But for me, from a marketing perspective, I always kind of tell craft distillers, and Scott, it comes from kind of what we talked about, is especially the farm, the grain to glass, that's a story you guys can pound your chest on a little bit of, if you're going to drink something good, drink something that is, here's the story. We can show you where the corn's grown, or we know the farm we get it from, and focus on that locally and in your state of, impacting. If you're not going to drink as much, great. When you drink like an adult, and drink something that is good and is pure. And I think, looking at farm distilleries, that's one of the places I think where they have a messaging strength of, here's what we are and here's how we do it. And that's why you should choose us. And I think that goes a long way with consumers looking for something more, who will throw a little bit more, money at a bottle if they've got the story of it.
Totally agree with that, Brandon. And what I would say is that, not that everyone should go out and buy a farm, but you still have, although it'd be cool, and Kirby knows I want to drive one of his tractors one of these days. But the point is that even at the distributor level, which I, again, fully acknowledge they are not putting a lot of effort and energy behind emerging brands at the moment, there's still a special place for the farm distiller. They still give it extra. Every one of our farm distilling clients get a little bit of extra attention. Not a lot, right? I don't want to make it like, hey, you buy a farm and then they all love you. But um, there's just a little extra corollary to the appreciation and attention. And I will also share the original distillers, even going back to my family in Italy, they were farms, right? So this is a beautiful thing, not only for the extension of adding value to the crops and preserving them, but it's also a cornerstone of communities in which they represent, right? Selling um, a truck of corn versus selling a truck of bourbon has monumental differences in terms of the value that it plays to its local community, right? So you're also really doing something wonderful uh, for the surrounding community, and I think that's a heartbeat that not only resonates in the U.S., but even when I travel to Scotland, there's farms, the UK, like that farm story, right? There's farms all everywhere. But my point is in our industry, that farm story still resonates truly globally.
Yeah. And I think,
Yeah.
getting to tour different distilleries. I mean, we have 3 brands here at our blending workshop who are just now getting started. One of them, he built his event space first and literally got his of occupancy last Friday, 2 hours before his
Wow.
first event. And so
Wow.
he built that first knowing I want money to come in
Wow.
to help start the distillery. We've got another one that's opening up in Plano, and they're in Lubbock. They're in Plano now. They're moving to Lubbock, and so we've got 3 brands here who are getting ready to launch, getting ready to build and launch, and so they're still out there. But
Mhm.
I look at like event spaces, and again, another strength is in your local community. Do things at your distillery if you have the space to make it a hangout, where people don't just think of like, I'm going to go do a tasting and a tour.
Yeah,
You know,
one and done.
add some cocktails, do an afternoon yoga class if you've got a beautiful farm or a beautiful property, and finish it with a tasting. I've seen success down here in Texas with distilleries doing that. So always finding those things to kind of increase your on-premise activities and things where your local community is like, yeah, hey, well, let's just go out to ABC Distilling and hang out, have a drink.
Yeah.
I think, is another way to look at, getting that local community build if you haven't already started doing that.
Yeah. All good points, Brandon. Thank you.
But
Okay. I don't know if we have any other questions, but thank you for joining. Thank you for listening. Again, if we can be helpful or something you want to talk about in private, please reach out. I'll happy to answer you.
yeah, Scott, thank you again.
My
Thoroughbred
pleasure.
Spirits Group, thank you again for sponsoring this webinar and
Oh,
being such
pleasure.
a great part of ADI. Some of you who are still on, probably in the next 24 hours, I'll get you the slides. I'll get you a link to the video when we get it edited and up on our YouTube channel. And a couple finishing notes. If you are not an ADI member, we would love to have you as part of it. Down in the resources group, there is a link that takes you straight to our membership. Feel free to reach out if you have questions about membership. Miami Beach 2026, that's where our conference is going to be, August 18th and 19th. So we're going to have some fun in the sun down in Miami. The conference center is literally a quarter mile from the beach. So, if you've never been, please think about joining. Scott and his team will be there, about 200 plus vendors, educational sessions for 2 days. So it's going to be a good time. But if you guys ever need anything, please reach out to ADI, sales at Distilling, members at Distilling. Reach out to me personally, Brandon at Distilling, and I'm happy to help you guys as well. Scott, again, thank you so much. Thank you to the
My
Thoroughbred
pleasure.
team for your guys' your passion and your commitment to the craft industry. I think this webinar kind of, again, you weren't trying to be a big cheerleader, but I think it's one of those refreshing points of, okay, like let's nail down and do this, and gave them a good footprint to get started. So thank you so much. Everyone have a happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year if I don't see you before then. And yes, Scott, thank you again so much.
My pleasure, brothers. Thank you, everybody. Have a great
Bye,
day.
y'all.